The Parable of Good or Bad. There is a story of a Chinese farmer whose horse ran off. When his neighbor came to console him, the farmer said, "Who knows what's good or bad?" When his horse returned the next day with a herd of horses following her, the foolish neighbor came to congratulate him on his good fortune. "Who knows what's good or bad?" said the farmer. Then, when the farmer's son broke his leg trying to ride one of the new horses, the foolish neighbor came to console him again. "Who knows what's good or bad?" said the wise farmer. When the army passed through, conscripting men for war, they passed over the farmer's son because of his broken leg. When the foolish man came to congratulate the farmer that his son would be spared, again the wise farmer said, "Who knows what's good or bad?"
What is good and what is bad? Both of these things are merely perceptions, viewpoints from the mind, as neither good nor bad truly exists. They are duality, but when you step back and look at everything from a complete, whole perspective, you realize that there is no good or bad. There just is. Everything just is, regardless of how you feel about it. The villains in movies don't necessarily always think that they're bad guys. They think that what they're doing is right for them.
So just as you go about your own lives, try not to judge the events that befall you as good or bad, but try and see them just as they are, events, and go with the flow, trusting that you are guiding yourself exactly as you need to, because that's how you're guiding yourself. In Lakesh.
She's dancing in the snow, twirling around and letting go. She falls, she lets earth know she loves it like a pillow. They say look around, buildings collapse, planes falling down. The world is not what it used to be.
The Parable of the Full Cup. A university professor went to see a Zen master. While the master was quietly serving tea, the professor talked about Zen. The master poured his visitor's cup to the brim, and then he kept on pouring. The professor watched the overflow until he could no longer restrain himself. "It is overfull! No more will go in," the professor blurted. The Zen master simply replied, "Like this cup, you are full of your own opinions and speculations. How can I show you about Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The professor got the message, took a deep breath, and nodded. The master continued, "See not one thing as a thing, but all of the possibilities of what it may be. A cup is a cup in your mind. To someone else, it could become a weapon. It could even be a hat. In this moment, it is a river. And now let us drink from the river of wisdom." He stopped pouring, and both of them picked up their tea. What about the mess?" the professor asked. The Zen master simply looked at him and said, "Let go of it, and let it be." The Parable of the Full Cup is a great reminder that in order to learn and receive wisdom, we have to be humble, to empty our mind and make room for the new. Like all Zen koans, this one explains a very simple concept, that learning a new skill requires an open mind. Far too often, we think we know everything, especially as we begin to get better at a skill. But in reality, every time we approach something new, we come at it with preconceived notions that we learned from our childhood or society. Spirituality is a great example of this. When people first approach it, a lot of us do so from a skeptical point of view. After all, until you've personally experienced the value of meditation or the chakras within you, the whole idea of energy centers in our body that can't be shown physically can seem crazy. And maybe there is something to the idea that our perception influences how much we really see, or at least allow ourselves to see. After all, people say seeing is believing, but believing is what allows you to see by exposing you to new ways of thinking. In the words of Henry Thoreau, when any real progress is made, we unlearn and learn anew what we thought we knew before. Sometimes it can feel as though we know everything about a topic, But we should remember that knowing is usually done from within one's own perspective. And while someone may know everything about something, it is only from their point of view. It is only by exposing oneself to new ideas, new people, theories, and ways of thinking that we can really grow as individuals. Zen Buddhist missionary Shunryu Suzuki Roshi once said that in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, in the expert's there are few. Is there a lesson here that when we come at a problem with a full mind, we can't hope to solve it? In other words, if our mind is so full of preconditions about how to solve something, maybe sometimes there isn't enough room for discovering the actual answer. Perhaps then the ultimate lesson of this parable can be expressed by another Zen proverb, that knowledge is the act of learning something every day, but wisdom is the act of letting something go every day.
There was once a stonecutter who was dissatisfied with himself and with his position in life. One day he passed a wealthy merchant's house, and through the open gateway saw many fine possessions and important visitors.
How powerful that merchant must be,
Thought the stonecutter. He became very envious and wished that he could be like the merchant. Then he would no longer have to live the life of a mere stonecutter. To his great surprise, he suddenly became the merchant, enjoying more luxuries and power than he had ever dreamed of, envied and detested by those less wealthy than himself. But soon, a high official passed by, carried in a sedan chair accompanied by attendants and escorted by soldiers beating gongs. Everyone, no matter how wealthy, had to bow low before the procession.
How powerful that official is.
He thought.
I wish that I could be a high official.
Then he became the high official, carried everywhere in his embroidered sedan chair, feared and hated by the people all around who had to bow down before him as he passed. It was a hot summer day, and the official felt very uncomfortable in the sticky sedan chair. He looked up at the sun. It shone proudly in the sky, unaffected by his presence.
How powerful the sun is.
He thought.
I wish that I could be the sun.
Then he became the sun, shining fiercely down on everyone, scorching the fields, cursed by the farmers and laborers. But a huge black cloud moved between him and the earth so that his light could no longer shine on everything below.
How powerful that storm cloud is.
He thought.
I wish I could be a cloud.
Then he became that cloud, flooding the fields and villages, shouted at by everyone. But soon he found that he was being pushed away by some great force and realized it was the wind.
How powerful it is.
He thought.
I wish I could be the wind.
Then he became the wind, blowing tiles off the roofs of houses, uprooting trees, hated and feared by all below him. But after a while, he ran up against something that would not move, no matter how forcefully he blew against it. A huge, towering stone.
How powerful that stone is.
He thought.
I wish I could be a stone.
Then he became the stone, more powerful than anything else on earth. But as he stood there, he heard the sound of a hammer pounding a chisel into solid rock and felt himself being changed.
What could be more powerful than I, the stone?
He thought. He looked down and saw far below him the figure of a stonecutter. I think the message of this parable is that you are already perfect, in a state of perfection. No matter how great, famous, wealthy, or powerful you seek to become, you are already everything you need yourself to be right now. Who are you going to be 5 seconds from now? That choice is completely up to you. The key is becoming aware of your own divinity and knowing what you want to do with it. Namaste.
Vegeta, hey, what's wrong? Vegeta, what's going on?
Something's attacking me!
Where? We can't see anything!
Inside!
Fight it! Resist!
I can't!
You must! That's it! Resist! Don't let him win, Vegeta! Don't let him do it! That's it! Fight! Fight it!
Supreme Kai, what's happening to him?
Vegeta, no! Don't let him! You've changed! You're not that way anymore! Babidi has no claim over you!
What's Babidi doing? Trying to kill him?
Worse than that, he's trying to take over his mind and enslave him so that he'll do whatever Babidi wishes him to do.
Isn't there any way that we can help him?
He struggles because his heart is impure. He has to choose himself. Don't let him take you, Vegeta. Let go. The past is the past. Don't think of it. Be innocent and clear.
How can you say that? I'm not innocent!
No way!
Don't let them do it, Vegeta! Don't let them use you! You're stronger than they are!
Gohan! Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Vegeta! No! Fight it, Vegeta! What a monstrous power! It's terrible! I can't even approach it!
The Parable of the Sacred Turtle. There once was an ancient Taoist master who was a great philosopher and strategist. He had a wide array of different skills, which made him very sought after by a few rulers. They wanted to use him for his abilities to advance their personal goals. One of the rulers, King Wei, sent his courtiers to find the Taoist master at his home and invite him to be the leader's chief counselor. Many people would find this job to be a blessing or an honor. When they went to his home, they found him fishing by the riverbank. The courtiers saw his living situation and thought he would surely jump at the opportunity for a high status and many riches. As they approached him and showed him the invitation, he responded with a story. Once upon a time, there was a sacred turtle which lived its life happily in the mud. It would roll around all day, enjoying its freedom in nature. But because it was considered a sacred turtle, it was captured by the king's men and taken to the palace. There, they killed the poor turtle and used its shell to predict the future. The Taoist master then asked the guards if they thought the turtle would have been happy to give up its life to live at the palace, or would it rather have lived its life in the mud? The guard answered that, of course, it would obviously be happier in the mud. And the Taoist master replied, well, then you have my answer. Go home and let me be a happy turtle here in the mud. And so he lived out his days at home the way that he wanted to. This parable shows us that we must do that which makes us truly happy, following our hearts on the inside. It is not up to other people and their expectations to bring us inner peace, but our own actions. Further, asking the question of what really makes you happy in life and honoring the simple, natural beauty of the world is imperative to a good life. This is kind of a sad parable at first, because some dynasties in China really did engage in ox and turtle bone readings. So there's actually an element of truth to the sage's story. Allegorically, however, this parable goes both ways. We must do that which makes us happy, no matter how simple it may seem, but we should also not assume to know that we know what's best for people just because we see things from a different perspective. Everyone ultimately lives according to their own level of awareness and consciousness. What makes one person happy will sometimes be opposite for another. Today, there are people who aspire to have a fancy car, a big apartment in a major city, and a big paying job. And you also have people who want the opposite of that, a quiet life in nature, away from those kinds of people. And both of those are entirely okay. By giving into the pressure and expectations of others, we will hinder our own happiness. Trust yourself and do what you need to do to fulfill your desires in this life. A young student approached his guru one day and said, "Master, you have spoken so much about karma, but I do not yet understand it. How can I truly learn?" The guru smiled and gestured for the student to follow. The two walked silently to the edge of the village where workers were busily engaged in making bricks for a house. The two stood and watched the activity of the brickmakers for some time, and the guru asked, "Now do you understand karma?" "No, master," the student replied. The guru paused and slowly nodded his head. He cleared his throat. "What are the workers doing?" "Making bricks," the student responded. "Very good. And what happens to the bricks once they are made?" asked the guru. "They're put in the stack," the student said. "And then?" the guru asked. "Well, they're used to build a house," the student responded, getting more agitated because he could not see what a single brick had to do with karma. The exchange continued, elaborating on every step of how and where the bricks were made, until finally the guru sighed and turned to his student. He leaned over and picked up a freshly made brick and handed it to the youth. "Here, carry this brick with you everywhere you go. Do not put it down under any circumstances. Do you understand?" "Yes," said the student. "Good. Return to me with the same brick in a year's time," exclaimed the guru. A year later to the day, the student returned, brick in hand, to the guru. The youth was barely able to contain his frustration. "Master, I have done exactly as you told me. I have carried this brick with me everywhere, and it has nothing more than caused aggravation and a nuisance among several other things I will not mention in your holy presence. And I have learned nothing at all about karma." The guru chuckled. "Did you set the brick down at any time?" he asked. "No, master, I carried it everywhere," the student exclaimed. The guru smiled. "Ah, now do you understand karma?" Karma is one of those things in the West that is seldom understood truly, as it has been passed down to us through translation after translation. While the basic understanding states that whatever we do will eventually return to us, the actual philosophy is much deeper rooted. This parable speaks to the burdens and choices we carry with us and how they can affect us in later life if we don't take time to work through them. Just as the tiny brick is used to make the foundation of a house, even the smallest and most seemingly insignificant event or act can have huge effects on our future and lives if we aren't aware. Perhaps this parable even speaks to the cyclical nature of the universe. Maybe there's an echo here of the whole holding on to a glass idea, where initially a glass of water is easy to pick up, but the longer that you hold on to it, the heavier it seems to become to us. Perhaps even the smallest of choices that we make can be carried with us for long times. Now, the student could have put the brick down at any time, but they remained true to their word and hopefully learned the lesson the guru was teaching. While karma is often presented as something we carry over between lifetimes, perhaps the silver lining here is that maybe clearing our karmic baggage is as easy as choosing to let go of the brick. And by letting go, we simply become part of a new cycle. The parable of the insults. There once lived a great warrior. Though quite old, he was still able to defeat any challenger. His reputation extended far and wide throughout the land, and many students gathered to study under him. One day, an infamous young warrior arrived at the village. He was determined to be the first man to defeat the great master. For along with his strength and skill, he had the uncanny ability to spot and exploit any weakness in an opponent. He would wait for his opponent to make his first move, thus revealing a weakness, and then would strike with merciless force at lightning speed. No one had ever lasted in a match against him beyond the first move. Much against the advice of his concerned students, the old master gladly accepted the young warrior's challenge. As the two squared off for battle, the young warrior began to hurl insults at the old master. He threw dirt and spit in his face, and for hours threw every manner of insult at his opponent known to mankind. But the old warrior simply stood there, motionless and calm. Finally, the young warrior exhausted himself. Knowing he was defeated, he left, feeling shamed. Somewhat disappointed that he did not fight the insolent youth, the students gathered around the old master and questioned him. "How could you endure such indignity? And how did you drive him away?" they asked. "If someone gives you a gift and you do not choose to receive it," the master replied, "to whom does the gift belong?" Although this parable has a different setting, it's fundamentally the same as the old Buddhist tale of the gift, where the great master is actually the Buddha teaching a lesson and the young warrior is a bystander who angrily disagrees. Whatever the context, the ultimate lesson and truth remains the same. To answer the master's question here, a gift would still belong to you if the recipient didn't accept it because, after all, you bought it. The truth of this teaching, however, lies in allegory. See, it's the same with your anger or negative emotions. If you become angry with someone and they don't feel insulted or accept your hostility, the anger falls back on you, as it was initially yours to give. You are then the one who becomes unhappy, not them, and all you've done is hurt yourself. The Buddha often beautifully concludes this tale by saying something along the lines of, "Just as a mirror reflects an object, as a still lake reflects the sky, take care that what you speak or act comes from a place of good. For goodness will always cast back goodness, and harm will always cast back harm." While notions of karma can sometimes be too abstract and philosophical to apply in our daily life effectively, I think the lesson here is about surrendering your emotions and living your life from a place of perspective and calm. No matter what the situation, if you surrender yourself to anger, in a way, you're surrendering your personal power to others, and doing so will ultimately give your life away. Perhaps the answer lies in being somewhat of a mirror, acting to reflect others' emotions back at them, showing them the truth of their actions. As always, a balance is required though, as reflecting too much of others sometimes leaves little room for our own self and our own intentions. A lot of the time, people's anger comes from a place of pain, detachment, or sadness. This parable teaches us to be conscious of our response and remember that while we can't control others, we can control our responses to them. And if we're mindful to put our ego aside, then the power of serenity remains with you. The Parable of the Fearless. There is a Burmese teaching story about a tyrant whose armies have laid waste to the country. As he's crossing the land, he comes to a stop at a small village and is informed by his generals that the local population have all run away into the hills. Everyone, that is, except one monk who refuses to leave his monastery. Enraged at such impudence, the tyrant marches directly to the monastery to confront the monk. He kicks in the door and stomps up to the monk, who is meditating peacefully in the center of the hall. "Don't you know who I am?" the tyrant growls. "I could take out my sword and cut you in two without even blinking an eye." The monk, without moving, replies serenely, "Don't you know who I am? I could sit here while you take out your sword and cut me in two without even blinking an eye." When we have acceptance, we are no longer attached to the transitory things of this world, even our own bodily survival. As Jesus advises in the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas, we become like a passerby. While this may seem counterproductive to our survival, adopting an attitude of acceptance does bring with it a certain amount of freedom. Let's be honest, no one knows when their time will come. You could be walking down the street tomorrow and have a tree randomly fall on you, or a car swerve into you off the road. But we don't let that stop us from leaving our houses. The monk in the parable accepts his position and realizes that if the tyrant really wanted to kill him, there isn't much that he could do about it in that moment. So it's kind of pointless to fight it or resist. That's not to say you shouldn't fight to stay alive in any situation, as self-preservation is important. Only that we should try to accept that death is merely a small part of life, an event that is transitory at best and comes whether we like it or not. The question then becomes, who is stronger in the story? The tyrant, who is evidently angered and upset by someone usurping his temporary power? Or the monk, who has accepted the reality of his life and is able to act gracefully and serenely, even in the face of death? Ultimately, this parable teaches us that once we awaken to the transitory nature of this world, all of our fears, doubts, and anxieties can go away, and we can finally be free to accept the world for what it really is.